And welcome back to another edition of the On the Board Sports Podcast. I am your host, Will Triucci, a.k.a. Will C, coming to you from Long Island, New York, quarantined once again in the basement. But, hey, we got to make the best of a bad situation. But I am joined by my co-host, Sean Thomas, a.k.a. Shawnee on the mic. Sean, how are you?
Well, I'm doing good with a capital G. Happy Thursday to you and yours. How are you doing, man?
Hanging in, can't complain, no complaints. Beautiful day outside. And, like I said before, one day at a time. But we have a very special guest with us. Joining us from ESPN is the wonderful Anish Shroff. Anish, how are you?
Hanging in there, quarantine life, trying to get out of the house, trying to get a haircut, which is so I got the lid on. The lid's not coming off for this one.
I gotcha. Hey, we're all in need of a haircut at some point in time, so just got to wait and see what happens. And you're coming from Charlotte, North Carolina right now, so that's awesome to hear. That's awesome. Anish, how did everything start up for you to be in the sports business right now and where you presently are?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I think when you say, when does it start, it's easy to pinpoint. Step one, working in a local news station out west and in Syracuse, or what you did in college. But I really think it starts when you're little. And, for me, I was, first generation U.S. citizen. My parents were immigrants. They came here, and sports was our way in, right? Sports was my family's way into America in a lot of ways. So when I was, 5, 6 years old and started playing T-ball, all of a sudden from my family, it became this exercise for a way to acculturate and a way to become part of, the American fabric. For me, it was, man, this is really cool, and I like this, and I want to know more about it, and I want to get better at it. And so playing sports led to following sports, and then, you reach a certain point where you're like, all right, I'm not going to grow past 5'10". Center field for the Yankees is probably out of the question. What's the next best thing I can do? And I would say probably, when I was a freshman or sophomore in high school, I had a really good idea of what I wanted to do and the direction I wanted to take my career one day. I didn't really know if it was going to be broadcasting or radio or writing, but I knew sports media was where I wanted to go. So, I always tell people this is an industry and a business and a job where you're not training for it when you get to college. In a sense, you've always been training for it. You've always been, back in the day, reading the newspaper and reading the box scores and reading about sports and watching sports whenever they were on. And then, you kind of add to that repertoire and you try to become worldly and well-rounded about other things. But, in a lot of ways, I've probably been preparing for this since I was 7, 8 years old.
Awesome.
That's awesome right there. It's awesome. Anish, I have several friends that went to Syracuse, graduated from there. They have so many great programs there. Just talk about going there and how proud you are to be and the alum of that school, because I have like about 10, 15 friends that graduated.
Yeah, Syracuse has a very special place in my heart, and I always say I don't think I'd be where I am without SU. The Newhouse School, you've got some great faculty and some great support staff, some great people around you. But really the core and the crucible of that place was a little college radio station called WAER. And when I first heard about that, I said, okay, where did the Mike Tiricos and the Len Bermans and the Ian Eagles and the Sean McDonoughs and Bill Ross, where did all these guys go? And Bob Costas, Marv Albert, all of them were WAER guys. And so I joined up at WAER, and when I was in college, the opportunities we were afforded, we were able to call football games home and away, men's college basketball home and away, men's college lacrosse home and away. And so my junior year, Carmelo Anthony's on campus. They won a national championship. My senior year, I'm now the sports director of the station. I'm going to Denver and Phoenix to call first round and Sweet 16 games. I'm getting to do Syracuse at Miami, Syracuse at Virginia Tech, going to the Orange Bowl and Lane Stadium to do football games, going to championship weekend for lacrosse. And at a very early age, you're getting kind of exposed to the big time. And you're meeting people and you're rubbing shoulders with people who are established in the business. And I think more than anything, that real world experience when you're not yet in the real world, but it felt like a real world experience, and it was as competitive an atmosphere as I've ever been a part of. And that includes working at ESPN. I think that makes you harder, that makes you stronger, and it makes you better, and you're forced to push yourself. So, as great as Syracuse was, don't get me wrong, I love Syracuse, but really WAER, our little radio station, that's where the magic happened.
Absolutely. And Anish, you come from New Jersey, literally minutes away from New York, being minutes away from the big city. Did you have any favorite teams growing up when you were younger? Did you have any special players or broadcasters in mind that were any one of your favorites? Take it away.
Yeah, the Yankees were my first love, and it's probably the one team, even still today, where I can just sit back and watch a game and enjoy it as a fan. I think the more you're into this business, you kind of see how the food is made sometimes.
Right.
And sometimes personal allegiances go by the wayside because you're covering a sport. For me, I cover college sports mostly.
Mm-hmm.
But the Yankees, for whatever reason, was my first love. I was a big Don Mattingly guy growing up. That was my favorite ball player. And even now, like my wife sometimes will yell at me, like, "What are you watching? You're watching sports. I know you're watching the Yankees. I know that's not for work." I'm like, this is my 2 hours. Like, this is where I can watch sports, and I'm not taking notes, and I can just be a fan again. Which, the longer you're in this, sometimes you find that can be hard to do. So I was a huge Yankees fan. I was a big Jets fan, like the 49ers too. And then when it came to hockey, I was a Devils fan. Claude Lemieux was my guy, man. That guy was tough as nails, would get into fights. And in basketball, everybody I knew was a Knicks fan. And, we didn't have cable growing up. So we didn't have MSG. We didn't get all these channels. We couldn't watch a bunch of Knicks games. And I became a Bulls fan because of Jordan. And I remember watching early, the first memory I have is the 1990 Eastern Conference Finals. They lose to Detroit. I'm like, man, this guy keeps taking beating. He keeps getting up. And started to root for him. Then the year after, they win it all, win it again. And Jordan became my guy. And it was a lot of fun in the 90s being a Jordan fan when you're surrounded by Knicks fans and you can just kind of rub that salt in the wound. So those were my teams really growing up. And then broadcasting-wise, Len Berman on WNBC, New York. I used to watch his sportscast almost religiously. And Bob Costas. Costas was the reason that I wanted to go to Syracuse. NBA on NBC was a staple of my weekends, and I thought Bob was the best. And I just learned so much from watching him. And I know, there's kind of a young generation now that maybe doesn't appreciate him as much. But what I loved about Costas was you felt smarter when you walked away from a Costas broadcast. He was so nuanced. Yes. It wasn't just hot takes. He could take you into the gray area. He could teach you. When he hosted the Olympics, I remember the 2004 Olympics in Athens. I mean, he's giving you the history of ancient Greece and the Peloponnesian War and, talking to you about Leonidas and Helen of Troy. And I said, that's a sportscaster. I mean, this guy could be Walter Cronkite. He could be doing the evening news. We're lucky to have him in sports. Right. And he was kind of the guy I idolized growing up.
Oh, man. Same with me and Will. Me and Will are definitely huge fans of him. Speaking of the broadcast booth, you also do play-by-play for different sports as well. Just talk to us about that. Like, what goes into, because from what we just see you and a host calling the game. What goes on behind the scenes to get you prepared to call a football game, a lacrosse game, so on and so forth?
Yeah, it's a good question. I equate it to the iceberg analogy, right? You just see the tip of the iceberg above the water. You don't see all the ice below the water.
Right.
And so the broadcast is really just the tip of the iceberg. Right. Everything that you alluded to is below the water, and that goes on during the week. And it's putting together notes and learning numbers and names and having information really on instant recall. We have our boards, we have our cheat sheets, but you want to commit as much of it to instant recall as you can. And I don't really believe in rote memorization, because I think if you're just memorizing stuff, you're memorizing it, you're not really understanding it. And so, me, I would read things over and over and really just try to grasp, hey, what's the story with this player? What's the story with this team? And then you kind of pick and choose your spots to deploy those informations those pieces of information during a broadcast. But there's a lot of work that goes in. And I tell folks, if the 3 hours that you're on air are the hardest 3 hours of your week, you haven't prepared. When you're doing a game, and if that's the biggest challenge, you feel like, oh man, like this is so hard, then you haven't done the work. If you've done the work and you've put in the time during the week, when you show up, I mean, it's there. And you're just calling the game and you have all that information at your fingertips, you know, you're firing lightning bolts. But if you haven't done the work, all of a sudden that becomes really hard. So, you know, putting in that work is critical.
Absolutely, 100% is. Anish, you look at, and you alluded to this earlier with you being a Bulls fan. I want to just get your take on the 30 for 30 right now, because you grew up in it. You're a huge Jordan fan, and where you are right now at the worldwide leader of sports, it's awesome to see this. So what's your take on the 30 for 30?
You know, a bunch of things. One, I love it. Two, the nostalgia factor, bringing me back to my childhood from a personal standpoint. It's great. Mm-hmm. But I also feel it crystallizes Jordan's greatness in a way that I don't think a modern athlete can achieve. And you have a generation now which is in Camp Kobe or Camp LeBron. And I always say, when you watch this documentary, it was a simpler time, you know, not that much simpler, but LeBron's greatness is debated on a game-to-game basis. I mean, think how absurd that sounds. If he goes 9 for 27 in game one, the narrative before game two is, oh, yeah, here's LeBron. You know, he didn't do well in the playoffs. Well, it's only one game. You know, Jordan had off shooting nights too.
Right.
But there were debate shows every day dissecting him the way there are now. And Jordan was able to live in this bubble of mythology. And there is a mythology to his career. I think when you look at greatness, you have to account for that. Look how it started, the shot against Georgetown in the 82 championship, right? Then he goes for 60-plus against the Celtics, you know, early in his career in the playoffs. And Larry Bird says that was not Michael Jordan. That was God playing basketball tonight. The shot against Hilo, right? Mm-hmm. You know, the move against Sam Perkins in the 91 finals, the shrug game. He retires. He comes back, drops 55 against the Knicks on the Garden. I mean, we're talking about these moments which, again, when you're not in a 24-hour news cycle, those moments last longer. And I think that's why we appreciate them. If I ask you on the spot, hey, what are LeBron's 5 greatest singular moments? Can you name them?
Right now, probably him winning a championship in Cleveland, the block against Andre Iguodala, him going to Miami, and, you know.
But I mean, right? Like shots that he made.
Right.
Jordan's career, there's so much of that. It's
so much, right?
Yeah.
It's the final shot against the Jazz in Game 6 in '98, which, you know, we'll see on Sunday night. All those things contribute to the mythology. And back then, when things happened, we could let it marinate. And we talked about it, not just for 24 hours after, but a week after, and a month after, years after. We just don't do that anymore because our world now is, this happened, okay, let's put a period on it, let's put a bow on it, let's move on to the next thing. Let's move on to the next thing. And so, to me, it becomes really hard for an athlete to transcend. And that's why I give LeBron a lot of credit. I mean, LeBron's floor is what, the 3rd greatest player of all time? That's his floor right now. You know, he'll probably go down as number 2 behind MJ. Right. But MJ had this mythology to him. And now we're seeing, again, just layers of that mythology. And we're breaking down the character a little bit. But, you know, all the stuff that he does on the court and the way he rides his teammates, I think that adds to the mythos. So, you know, that's kind of my big takeaway. You know, you want to make this greatness argument, you got to factor in mythology. You have to factor in the media and you know, the way people wrote about him, the way people dissected him versus now, because, no, that matters. That matters. I mean, LeBron has had a critic in Skip Bayless who's been, you know, trying to convince the world LeBron's not as good as everybody thinks he is for how many years now. You know, Jordan never had somebody do that on a national stage every day like LeBron does. And whether you agree with it or not, that does influence people and it influences opinion.
You know, a lot of people look at that, and you hit it right on the head, and that's something that many people don't realize is the fact that here we are in in this world where everything's so instantaneous and we're looking at the next viral thing. And we get news coverage 24/7, no matter where it is, no matter what the news outlets are. Now, it's so true. You just hit it right on the head, Anish.
You know what it is? Think about it. Something happens, right? What is our reaction as consumers? Oh, I got to have a take on this. I got to tweet something. I got to read. We got to find this video. What's Twitter saying about it? As opposed to just being present, being in that moment, and enjoying it. I mean, even the way I remember the way I watch sports now on TV versus the way I used to. You know, I remember my brother and I would watch these Bulls playoff games, and we're glued to our television set. There's no computer, there's no phone, there's no games, there's nothing else around, and we're biting our fingernails. We're on the edge of the seat. What's going to happen in the final minutes? Now you're watching it in the final minutes. It's kind of like, what's Twitter saying? What's Twitter saying?
Right.
We're not even processing the full gravity of these amazing moments anymore. Take Kawhi Leonard's shot in Game 7, right? As big a shot as we've ever seen in the history of the NBA playoffs. A game winner at the buzzer in Game 7, right? And I remember watching that game with folks, and it was like, oh, man, look at this tweet. Look what this person tweeted. Look what this person tweeted. I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking, dude just hit one of the most iconic shots in the history of the NBA. Like, soak it in.
Right.
And we're doing
we don't let ourselves do that anymore.
Right. Even some broadcasters too. They just let it go out there, and they just focus in on the moment. They soak in the crowd. They let the crowd noise take over everything, and that's what makes a good broadcaster. I feel like anyway is when they just for those big moments they just let the crowd paint the picture for the sound and everything like that going in. It's just as simple as that.
Yeah, that's very true.
Especially in a big moment like that too.
Especially in a big moment, exactly.
Yeah. Good, Sean.
Anish, as you know, May is such a big month for sports. You have baseball and the playoffs and the NBA, the NHL. We don't have any of that going on right now. Is it hard going into work, trying to work, not having what the norm is? Like, how has it been trying to get stuff to talk about when the norm that you guys used to have isn't going on?
It's been disruptive to our norm, certainly, and I'm sure you guys feel the same way. For me, May is a big month. Lacrosse is my primary sport in the spring for ESPN, and this is the month that we're doing playoffs. We're doing postseason. So, last week would have been the first round. This week we would have been doing quarterfinals. The following week is championship weekend, the semis and the championship. And I look forward to that every year. And so, it's kind of a void. But as you mentioned, it's baseball getting into swing, with the second month coming around. It's the NBA playoffs. I'm not really a big hockey guy anymore, but, for the NHL fans, we missed out on the Masters. I mean, there's so many things where, I think you do feel it. And, again, personally for me, somebody who covers college sports, I look at college football. So my attention right now is a few months out. And I really hope college football is back because obviously it impacts not just me and a lot of my colleagues who cover college sports and work in that arena. But if we don't have college football, certainly the domino effect of that on the rest of college athletics is significant. And I do think we'll have college football in some way, shape, or form. Maybe it's not what it's always looked like, but I think you could say that of pretty much every other sport that's going to come back. We're going to have some different version of it, and that's going to have to be our new normal maybe for, the next 6 to 18 months, whoever knows how long this thing goes on. But I think right now as a nation, man, we're just appetizing for sports. I mean, I learned at an early age, the great thing about sports is that it lets you experience all these unbelievable emotions, but at the end of the day, you can do it without consequences, which is the best part, right? Like triumph, agony, hope, despair. I mean, all these great emotions, anxiety, whatever, but there's no consequences to it. And so we can lose ourselves in these moments and other people and other teams. And right now, when the world is as chaotic as it's been, we need something to go to just for a few hours a day to lose ourselves in, certainly without consequences.
Right.
Yeah, that's definitely true. That's definitely true. Well, let me ask.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, so can you take so how like when you're calling games that you do, when somebody makes like a game-winning catch or in lacrosse they scored like the game-winning goal, everybody goes crazy, everybody goes nuts, rah rah rah. How hard or how and easy is it for you to stay calm, knowing that you're a fan of the sport too, and you may want to, get, what I'm saying, rah 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 too. Like how hard or how and easy it is to just stay calm and continue to do what you do.
I believe that no moment exists within a vacuum. So our job as broadcasters is to take what happens within the moment and piece it as part of a larger narrative, right? Why and how. And so in those moments, you want to capture context. Last year, I'll give you an example. We had an unbelievable quarterfinal round in our lacrosse tournament where 3 games went into overtime, unbelievably high-scoring games, and we had a team in Virginia that ended up winning the national championship that, wins in overtime in the quarterfinals, wins in double overtime in the semifinals. And the way they won, there was this kind of magic dust around this program that they were down 5 in the fourth quarter in the quarterfinals. They were down 2. The other team had the ball with like a minute and change to go in the semis. And all that team had to do is literally inbound it and play pitch and catch. And if the guy catches the ball, they can run out most of the clock. But they end up getting the ball back. They score. They win the faceoff. They tie it, and they win in double overtime. And so, it was, hey, the Cardiac Cavaliers live to see Championship Monday. You kind of want to capture who they are, and then you want to do it quickly because, as you guys were talking about, the worst thing that I want to do is get in the way of the moment. And
Right.
We work with our directors and with our producers. So, boom, the goal happens. You want to, again, sell the crescendo of it. You want to build the anticipation right before the moment, and then you want to nail the dismount and hit that call. And then you kind of want to lay out and let the director cut around and get the shots, get the crowd, because there's nothing that I can say at that point that's going to present that moment better than those pictures at that point. And then when it subsides a little bit, you come back in and you find out, where can I add context? Where can I fit this into a larger narrative? Hey, we just saw the culmination of the greatest quarterfinal round in the history of this sport, right? What an appetizer for championship weekend in Philadelphia next week, and then you sign off. So, yeah, to me, those moments, it's really a feel thing. I wouldn't say I intentionally script anything out, but late in the game, if I'm sensing, okay, this may come down to the wire, now just the wheels start turning. All right, what am I going to say if this comes down to a game-winning shot? Or how do I want to say it? How quickly do I want to get out? And it's not so much how I'm going to describe the play call. It's how I'm going to contextualize the call. Hey, if this team wins at the buzzer, this team wins at the buzzer, what's the bigger story here to kind of put it all into place and crystallize it for viewers? So you start thinking about that. But I like to be organic. I don't like to, have a catchphrase or script anything out in those moments.
That's interesting right there, Anish. Very interesting. Now, you were on in the early 2000s, you were on a show for ESPN called Dream Job. How is that, being involved in a show like that, and then, having this manifest for you is just absolutely awesome. Show us.
I get asked about that every now and then. And the thing I tell people is, it was a TV show more than it was an actual representation of what that job, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
When I started in Bristol as an anchor, before I made the move to play-by-play, I mean, my first shifts were, 3 hours. Like, I'd be on 9 to 12 in the morning, or, sometimes you're on the overnight shift and, you do a 30-minute wheel, but you'd have to stay until the last game was over. So, you're on air. Maybe there's a lot of breaking news 2-3 hours at a time. on this show, I mean, you get maybe 5 minutes of airtime, that you're actually on and presenting for the whole
Right.
half hour, whatever it was. But I tell people all the time that not winning was the best thing that happened to me. And kind of say midway through, I said, all right, I got a shot. I knew I had a shot, but there was a part of me that really did wonder, and maybe this is why I lost, that, am I ready? I was 22 years old. I said, if I win, I just don't want to be there for a year, and that's all you were guaranteed, which was a one-year contract, not get renewed, and then you're kind of back in the ether, and maybe they've already made their assessment of you, and it doesn't matter how much better you get, you're gone. And when I lost, I got to the final three. When I got kicked off, it's funny. I still have people tell me all the time, oh, you should have won or this, whatever. I'm like, all right, they're like friends of mine. I have never felt that way for a minute, and actually relief was the feeling that I had. I said, you know what? I felt they made a good enough impression, okay? The guy who ended up winning got a one-year contract and was not renewed, so that probably would have been me. And I kind of went and, worked in local news, went to Yakima, Washington, making $20,000 a year, and, had a couple of contacts from ESPN. One of the good things about it was, one of the judges was one of the hiring managers there, Al Jaffe, and I would send him my work just to get feedback. And I remember when I started a job in Syracuse, I said, hey, I've been out here for, a few months now, and he had seen my last tape from my previous job, would love to send you, an air check for some feedback or whatever. And he sends me an email back, and he says, hey, I remember seeing your last one. We may have some openings coming up for ESPN News. Send me your next sportscast. I was like, wow. I didn't even, I was not even, looking for that. I had just signed a 2-year contract up in Syracuse, just started a new job. I was like, hey, I've been here, new job. Just, you're updating your network, and we'd love to send you something, any feedback you can have, rip it apart, tell me where I need to work, and I'll get better. I was like, man, okay. So then I go in and I do, the sportscast the following night. It was an 11 p.m. sportscast I was entering, and I think I got in there about 10 a.m. making sure every word was just right. I knew what I was going to say, and went through the scripts probably 100 times before I knew they were ready. Right. And then made sure Master Control put that on DVD for me. Express mailed it the next morning. A week later, I get an email, hey, we got your tape. We'd love to bring you in for an interview and an audition. And, the rest, as they say, is history. So had I won, I don't think I would have lasted. And not winning kind of gave me the opportunity to go to these smaller places, cut my teeth, get better, and also kind of having a little bit of the knowledge of, okay, I think I know what they're looking for, and I think I know what it takes to maybe someday get back there. And within 4 years, they hired me after that show, and so it's worked out.
Gotcha. That's awesome.
That's awesome, Mason. Awesome. So my final question for you is, do you have a top two, like the best games that you've called, the best games that you've been in the booth, and you said, wow, this is probably the greatest game that I've called? Do you have a favorite 2 or 3 games?
Yeah, and they're, I guess you could say they're favorites for different reasons. It's funny, every time somebody asks me this, I always blank, because after a while you do so many, and we were talking about before, it's the 24-hour news cycle. You're done with one, you put it away, you're on to the next one.
Right.
But there's a few that just stick out for different reasons. So I'll give you a couple. I was lucky enough to be on the FCS championship call for a few years when North Dakota State was winning. And I got to see Carson Wentz play in college. Nice. And I remember being at a practice the day before the championship, and there's NFL scouts lined up. And this was Wentz's junior year. And they were looking at this defensive end named Kyle Emanuel from North Dakota State. I think he ended up going to the Chargers. And so I'm talking to this Chargers scout there, and I said, what do you think of Emanuel? And he goes, yeah, kid's pretty good. He's like, mid-round pick, but tell you what, man, that quarterback for North Dakota State, I don't know how long they're going to keep him a secret. He's got a chance to be something really special. And I was like, second, third round pick. He's like, no, like top 10, like top 10, maybe top 5. So the year after, we're back, and the championship rolls around, and Wentz hasn't played in 8 weeks because of a broken wrist. And at this point, I've got a pretty good relationship with their head coach. The kid who's his backup is 8-0 as a starter, and they're in the championship game. And so the coach is telling us that Wentz has been cleared, and we're like, hey, well, is Carson going to play, or are you going to play the other kid? And, there's a part of me that says, I know how good Carson Wentz is, but he hasn't played in like 2.5 months.
Right.
This other kid's 8-0. It's not like this other kid's been playing poorly. Right. Why would you change anything right now? Why would you bring him back? What if he's rusty? And game time decision, Wentz starts. First series of the game, goes into a 3-step drop, and he throws an out route. And the receiver, is blanketed. The DB's all over him. And as soon as that receiver breaks into his route, ball's there waiting for him. And I look at my analyst, and we look at each other, and he just goes to me like this. Because, again, Wentz had everything to lose. Like, if he plays poorly, his draft stock falls.
Right.
He played. He was phenomenal. They win the game, and he ends up being the number 2 pick. So that was one. I got the call, like, Deshaun Watson, 4 of his first 5 starts at Clemson. And to see the genesis of that program take the next step, which was unbelievable, where the moment he made that first start against UNC and he set a couple of school single-game records, we're looking at each other. They just opened up a championship window. Next year, they're in the title game. 2 years later, they win it all. And, the Clemson machine basically started when Watson became a starter. So that was memorable. Here's a funny one. I did a high school football game once at Bishop Gorman, and we looked down in the stands, and Flavor Flav was down there. So a couple of my boys were at the game because it was in Vegas. Hey, you're going to Vegas? We'll tag along. So, like, 2 of my college buddies decided to come. They're hanging in the booth. So I say to one of them during, like, the second or third quarter, I was like, hey, like, can you guys go see if Flavor Flav wants to, like, come do a series or 2 with us?
Yeah.
I was like, all right, we'll check. So they come back with him. So he's back in the booth with us. He's got the clock around his neck, the whole 9. And my producer's in my ear. He's like, holy shit, dude, we got Flavor Flav. This is unbelievable. And the running back for one of the teams was like Muhammad Ali's grandson. And Flavor Flav was friends with the family and knew the mom or whatever. So he just starts going, and we're like letting him rip. And it's hilarious to the point where we're going to a break. And Flavor Flav rolls us out to break. That's when, you say something over the video going to break. Mm-hmm. And he gives us a little, yeah, boy. My producer jumps in my ear, and he goes, dude, Flavor Flav just took us out to break. I quit. My career, this is the high point of my career. The best part of all this was our director, bless his heart, why is this guy still on? Who is this guy? And I'm like, dude, it's Flavor Flav. He's like, I don't know who that is. So after the game, I'm telling my director, dude, he's like, what was the point of that? Why did we have that rando on? I'm like, it's not a random guy.
He's not a random guy.
He's like, do you watch TV? And he goes, I go to bed by 7 o'clock on days that I'm not working. It was hilarious. He had no idea. He couldn't understand why we were doing it. He's like, why are we keeping him on for another segment? I'm like, we got Flavor Flav on. We're going to keep him on.
That's funny. That's an awesome story right there, man.
Awesome story right there.
That is. Anish, my last question for you is, do you have anybody that's a favorite at ESPN that's like a favorite colleague of yours, a favorite coworker? Who might that be?
I don't want to single one person out because I don't want to offend anybody that I'm leaving out. But I would say in large part, man, people there were really great to me and still are. I got a lot of good friends from ESPN. The one guy that I will mention, he's not there anymore. But when I started, and I was one of these young guys who started, he really took me under his wing and mentored me. And he's the guy that you guys probably see on TV out in New York, and that's Bill Pito. Bill Pito, who's at MSG now, he does the Knicks and he does the Rangers.
Yep.
When I started, he really made an effort to get to know me. We became really good friends. He was a mentor to me. He was hilarious. One of the first shows I ever did with him, we were doing ESPN News together, and he's sitting there, and he can't pronounce my name. So, he's doing the introductions for the two of us. So he's like, Anush, Ashish, Ashok. He goes, hey, man, I'm not going to say his name right 6 times tonight. Why don't you just have him do the hi, hello? Billy was a character, man. Like he would always say, you driving home tonight? I was like, yeah, but be careful for that black ice. He taught me, although I didn't do it, but he did. He taught me how to go to the cafeteria and not pay for food. Bill was one of the all-time characters, and I remember one of the coolest things I've seen was on his last day. He got done with his show. The entire newsroom gave him a standing ovation when
Wow.
he got done. And there have been a lot of people who have had bigger profiles and who've been bigger names to come through ESPN.
Mm-hmm.
You could make the case in the history of the company, he's one of the 2 or 3 most popular on-air people amongst his peers.
That's amazing. That is.
And we do see him living here in New York, and he is
Yep.
funny here. So I could just
He's the man.
how funny he was.
Absolutely.
He had one. It was funny. One of the great lines that he had was, we're doing a show, and we had, we were in a tape segment, and he looks at me and he goes, Anish. It's like, yeah, Billy. He goes, I used to sit here and do shows with Berman. And I was like, oh yeah. And he goes, like, now I'm doing 8 to 11 ESPN News with you. and so I said, Billy, is that good for me or is it bad for you? And he goes, a little bit of both, man. A little bit of both. He goes, I tell folks, I used to do primetime with Boomer. Then I was doing the Monistat halftime show with Vera Jones. And now I'm doing 8 to 11 ESPN News with you.
Oh, that's hilarious. That is hilarious.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Anish,
man.
actually, I do have one. This is the last question for me. I usually do this with everybody. Whenever I have a final question, Sean can attest for this, but I have one more final question. Out of the 4 professional sports, NBA, NHL, NFL, MLB, which one comes back first?
I probably think it's going to be baseball. I mean, they've kind of set this July date. I don't see basketball coming back before that. You got the KBO already out there in Korea. I just think it's a game where the physical contact is there, but it's far more limited than it is in some of the other sports. So if I were to bet, I think it's baseball.
Okay, interesting.
Awesome.
Very interesting. Anish, how do the people follow you on social media?
Instagram and Twitter at Anish ESPN. I've actually tried to scale back a little bit just because it's easy to just get caught up with this all day, but
Yep.
try to read a book, try to spend time with the family. So, and hopefully you guys are doing the same.
We're trying.
Anish, man, thank you so much for taking some time. Appreciate it, pal. Continue to stay safe. And me and Will are huge fans of your work. So just continue to stay safe. And thank you so much, pal.
We appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. Take care, guys.
Absolutely. You're welcome back on anytime, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
Peace out.
That was the one and only Anish Shroff of ESPN. Will, that was a great, great time, man. I didn't think I would laugh this much, Will, but that was great.
There was a lot of priceless moments involved. Anish is a great guy. You could obviously tell from the way how he speaks. He's an awesome individual. And, hey, make no mistake about it. He knows what he's talking about. He went to Syracuse, top school for broadcasters alike, and he's got a future. He's a great individual talent. What more can you want? What more can you say?
Very true. Very, very true. Will, any final thoughts, pal?
Happy anniversary to my parents. 32nd anniversary today for them on May 14th. So congratulations to them. And not only that, but, for every essential worker out there, I know it's been said almost every episode, but can never leave them without a thank you. Doctors, nurses, EMT workers, firefighters, cops, construction workers, working on infrastructure. They never get any due, but they should, for making everything great at that point in time. I'm an electrician outside of this whole podcast, so I may be deemed essential, but my job is deemed non-essential, if that makes any sense to any people out there. But hey, make no mistake about it. Even the grocery store worker, I used to work in a grocery store back years ago, and now people are appreciating them, fast food workers as well. And anybody that works in a restaurant or anybody that I miss, postal workers, people that work for UPS, FedEx, just want to say thank you for keeping on and keep on trucking, baby. All right. Just stay safe out there. Stay healthy. We're all going to get through this. And eventually, this all will be, a story that we might either laugh at, cry at, or whatever the case may be. So thank you. Thank you to all the essential workers out there right now that are busting their ass. God bless you.
Well said, Will. Well said. And I echo those same sentiments. And Will, congratulations to mom and dad. 32 years strong, 32 years strong. That is amazing. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Shout out to mom and dad. My final thoughts are, Will, another great show. And as you guys see, we are just pumping out episode after episode. Like, me and Will are trying to get as much guests on as we can. Me and Will are keeping up to sports as much as we can because we know that you guys love the show. We're trying to do our best. So, final thought, Will, shout out to you as than always, and shout out to Anish Shroff for coming on and making the time as well. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. On that note, for everybody here from the On the Board Sports team, for Sean, aka Shawnee on the mic, and for Anish Shroff, I am your host, Will Triucci, logging out. We will talk to you guys soon. Peace out, stay safe, and be healthy, everybody.